This story will grip your heart from the very first moment. Imagine a cold, desolate desert night, a lone cowboy riding through the wilderness, and suddenly a beautiful Apache woman appears, whispering, "Warm my bed tonight or freeze out there." What happens next is a tale of danger, trust, and unexpected connection that you will never forget. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, and comment your thoughts below. Let's get started and dive into this unforgettable Wild West story. The desert wind bit through Caleb's worn coat as he rode along the jagged cliffs, the sun having vanished hours ago behind the distant horizon. His horse stumbled on loose gravel, the sound echoing through the still night, and Caleb cursed under his breath, weary from days on the trail. He hadn't seen another soul for miles, only the unforgiving terrain stretching endlessly. The silence was heavy, pressing against him with every step. He knew the night would be bitter, the cold gnawing at his bones. Still, he rode on, driven by duty and the hope of finding shelter before the darkness claimed him completely. Through the thickening gloom, Caleb spotted a faint flicker of light ahead, smoke curling lazily into the black sky. A homestead, abandoned or inhabited, he couldn't tell, yet it drew him like a magnet. The wind carried with it the scent of firewood, warmth, and human life, a temptation too strong to resist. His horse snorted uneasy as if sensing the unknown, but Caleb pressed forward. He tied the animal to a weathered post outside the cabin, his fingers stiff from cold, eyes scanning the shadows. Then he heard it, a voice so soft, so compelling, it made him freeze in place, heart pounding. "Warm my bed tonight or freeze out there," the voice whispered, delicate but commanding, threading through the night like a melody. Caleb's pulse quickened. The speaker was near, yet invisible in the dim light, and the words carried a strange mixture of threat and invitation. He had heard stories of the Apache, proud and fierce, and of their women, untouchable, unyielding, but this voice was different. It was human, vulnerable, yet confident, and it pierced the loneliness Caleb had carried for weeks. He swallowed hard, torn between caution and the desperate hope for warmth and companionship in the freezing desert night. The woman emerged from the shadows, her silhouette framed by the firelight. She was unlike anyone Caleb had seen before. Dark hair fell across her shoulders, catching the glow of the flames, her skin radiating a warmth that defied the cold outside. Her eyes held a quiet intensity, a combination of sadness and fierce determination that told Caleb she was no stranger to hardship. She stepped closer, barefoot on the worn floorboards, and Caleb could feel the weight of her gaze, as if she were measuring him, deciding if he could be trusted. "It's dangerous out there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but enough to command attention. "The cold isn't the only threat. The desert doesn't forgive weakness." Caleb nodded, unsure of what to say. He had lived his life among danger, had faced outlaws and storms alike, but something in her tone made him pause. There was more than warning in her words. There was care, even affection, hidden beneath a tough exterior. "I need shelter for the night," he said finally, voice rough from the ride. "No harm intended." A faint smile curved her lips. "Then come inside," she said, stepping aside. Caleb entered the cabin, taking in the modest space. It was simple, practical, yet the warmth radiating from the hearth filled more than just the room. It reached into his bones. He hung his coat, removed dusty boots, and allowed himself a deep breath of relief. The fire's glow highlighted the sharp lines of her face, the soft curve of her lips, and Caleb realized that despite the exhaustion weighing on him, he had never felt more alert. Her presence was magnetic, commanding his attention without a word. The first silence between them was comfortable, a rare gift Caleb hadn't known he craved. He watched as she tended to a small pot on the hearth, her movements fluid, precise, almost ceremonial. She didn't speak much, and neither did he, yet a conversation unfolded without words. His eyes followed hers, noticing the careful way she moved, the way she avoided spilling a drop, the way the firelight danced across her skin. In that quiet, Caleb sensed a kindred spirit, someone who had endured loneliness and danger and still carried a spark of life and hope in her eyes. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice soft, respectful. She paused, glancing at him over her shoulder, considering. "Eater," she replied finally, simple and strong. Caleb repeated it softly, committing it to memory. Eater. The name carried weight, dignity, and a strange comfort. The fire crackled, filling the silence between them, and Caleb realized that he hadn't felt this alive in days. The desert outside was still ruthless. But inside this cabin, warmth and understanding had replaced the chill and isolation he had carried for so long. Hours passed in a gentle rhythm of movement, small talk, and shared quiet moments. Hita spoke of her family, the land, the hardships of survival, and the encroachment of settlers, while Caleb recounted tales of trails, rustlers, and the relentless solitude of the cowboy life. Each story revealed a piece of their souls, a thread weaving them together in understanding. The boundaries between them softened, not with romance yet, but with mutual recognition of strength, resilience, and the simple humanity of two people surviving in a harsh world. Night deepened, wind rattling the cabin, snow threatening at higher elevations, and the fire's glow diminished to embers. Caleb shivered slightly despite his layers, and Hita noticed, her eyes softening with concern. "You'll freeze if you stay out there much longer," she murmured, moving closer to offer a blanket. Caleb hesitated, pride warring with the desperate need for warmth. Finally, he accepted, draping the fabric over his shoulders, and felt a warmth beyond the material. Hita's presence, quiet and watchful, filled the space around him, and for the first time in weeks, he felt the weight of isolation lift. As the night grew colder, Caleb and Hita settled near the fire, the crackling embers casting long shadows across the cabin walls. They spoke less now, letting the silence speak, communicating through glances, gestures, and the shared understanding of hardship. Caleb felt a strange vulnerability, the kind that comes when trust is extended, even in small doses, and realized how rare it was to find someone who could see beyond the exterior, who could sense the man beneath the cowboy's hardened shell. Hita, in turn, studied him with a cautious curiosity, noting the exhaustion and the resilience, the pride and the humility intertwined in his being. Eventually, exhaustion from travel and cold overtook them, and they leaned back, allowing the fire's warmth to seep into their bones. Caleb felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years, a fragile bridge forming between two solitary souls. Hita whispered again, almost as a challenge and almost as comfort, reminding him that survival wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. Caleb, though still wary, realized that this night, this small act of shared warmth and trust, might be a turning point, a rare moment where the harsh desert became less hostile, and humanity, unexpectedly, became their ally. The first light of dawn crept into the cabin, pale and hesitant, and Caleb stirred, stretching his stiff limbs while Hita continued her quiet morning routine. The wind outside had softened, leaving only a cold whisper across the desert. Caleb watched her, noting the grace in every movement, the calm resilience that seemed to radiate from her very presence. The night had left its mark, not just on his body, but on his soul. For the first time in years, he felt a bond, fragile yet undeniable, forming in the harsh wilderness. He realized survival was no longer just a matter of strength, but also of trust. Hita glanced at him briefly, offering a small smile. "You rode far," she said, a statement not a question. Caleb nodded, unsure how to convey the exhaustion, the gratitude, and the cautious relief he felt all at once. "The trail is unforgiving," he replied. "I've traveled longer than I should have." Her eyes softened. "Then rest before you ride," she suggested, the authority in her voice softened by genuine concern. Caleb sank into a chair by the fire, feeling the tension of weeks melt slightly, aware that the rare warmth of companionship had softened the edges of his weary heart. Over breakfast, they shared quiet conversation, fragments of their past lives weaving together like threads in a tapestry. Hita spoke of her childhood, the long days spent learning to survive in the unforgiving desert, the responsibilities placed upon her by circumstance. Caleb shared the hardships of trail life, the loneliness of nights under endless stars, the constant vigilance required to endure the dangers of the frontier. They spoke not as strangers, but as two survivors recognizing kindred spirits, their words laced with empathy and understanding, each discovering in the other a rare companionship that neither had anticipated finding in the vast, lonely desert. As the sun climbed higher, painting the desert in warm golds and deep shadows, Caleb prepared to continue his journey. He tied his horse outside, checking the saddle and reins, but his mind lingered on Hita. He realized that leaving this place would not just mean facing the harsh terrain again, it would mean leaving the first human connection that had softened his solitude. Hita approached him, quiet but steady, her expression unreadable yet compelling. "The trail ahead is dangerous," she said, her voice carrying a warning, "but you have strength, and now, perhaps, a reason to ride with hope." He smiled faintly, gratitude mingling with an unfamiliar vulnerability. "I didn't expect anything like this," he admitted, motioning to the cabin, the fire, and the quiet warmth of her presence. Hita's gaze softened. "Life in the desert is harsh," she said, "but even here, kindness and trust find their way if one is willing to accept them." Caleb nodded, feeling the truth in her words, understanding that the bond forged between them in a single night had transformed the emptiness he had carried for so long. The memory of warmth, of firelight, and of Hita herself would travel with him as faithfully as any horse or gun. Before he mounted his horse, Caleb made a decision. "I won't forget this night," he said, looking directly at her. Hita's eyes glimmered with acknowledgement, neither pride nor fear, only a quiet acceptance. "Few would survive out here and remember the good in people," she replied. "I hope you do." Caleb adjusted his hat, a gesture of respect, and touched the saddle one last time. As he swung into the saddle, he realized that the desert, while still harsh and unpredictable, had offered him more than survival. It had offered him connection, courage, and the hope that life could sometimes surprise even the most solitary of men. The trail ahead stretched endlessly, a ribbon of sand and rock cutting through the wilderness. Caleb's horse moved steadily, hooves kicking up dust as they navigated the uneven terrain. The wind carried with it a lingering warmth, not from the sun, but from the memory of the fire and Hita's presence. He thought of her often, replaying her words, the gentle way she had offered trust, the quiet strength she carried. The desert, which had once been a symbol of isolation and danger, now seemed alive with possibility, its harshness tempered by the knowledge that compassion and courage could exist even in the bleakest places. Days passed, and Caleb's journey continued, yet the memory of Hita remained constant. Each night, as he camped under the stars, he recalled her voice, the flicker of the firelight, and the unexpected warmth of the cabin. His solitude was no longer absolute. Her presence lingered as a quiet comfort, a reminder that connection could exist even across distance and circumstance. He found himself riding with renewed purpose, not just seeking survival or justice, but cherishing the human bonds that made the struggle worthwhile, and understanding that even in a cruel and unyielding land, hope could flourish. One evening, after a long day chasing leads on stolen cattle, Caleb paused atop a ridge, watching the desert bathe in the golden light of sunset. The silence reminded him of the night in Hita's cabin, of her soft whispers and the fragile trust they had shared. He realized then that survival was only part of the story. The human heart required more. Courage alone could not sustain a man through the harshness of the Wild West. It required empathy, connection, and moments of unexpected tenderness, like the one he had been gifted in that small cabin. The memory warmed him, stronger than fire or blankets ever could. Eventually, the trail led him to other towns, other faces, and other challenges, yet he carried Hita with him in spirit. He helped travelers in need, shared food and water with the weary, and faced danger not with bitterness, but with a tempered heart. The night in the cabin had taught him a lesson that no gunfight or harsh storm could. The Wild West was brutal, but humanity, even in its smallest acts, could endure and transform lives. Caleb became known not just as a skilled cowboy, but as a man who understood the strength of trust, the power of kindness, and the rare courage it took to embrace another human being fully, even when the world was against it. Years later, Caleb would sometimes return to that ridge, looking down toward the cabin that had given him warmth. Not just for his body, but for his soul. He never saw Hita again, and yet she remained a constant presence in his thoughts, a symbol of the rare and beautiful connections that the harshest lands could offer. He knew that some people were meant to cross our paths for a single night, to leave a mark so profound that it reshapes the way we live, love, and survive. The desert was still vast and dangerous, but Caleb faced it with a heart renewed, carrying the warmth of trust and the memory of a whisper that had changed everything. And so the legend of Caleb, the lone cowboy, and the Apache woman named Hita lived on, not in grand tales of gunfights or treasure, but in the quiet moments where hearts met, trust was given, and warmth was shared in a world that so often offered only cold and peril. Their story, brief yet profound, became a reminder that even in the harshest wilderness, human connection could flourish, leaving behind a legacy far richer than any fortune or fame. And as the sun set once more across the endless Arizona horizon, the memory of one night's courage, trust, and warmth continued to echo across the silent, unforgiving desert, like a whisper carried forever on the wind.